just wanted to say that I think that the launch of this movement is a tremendously exciting moment. And it is, I think, born of a real recognition that it's only by making common cause that we'll be able to really address the huge harm that is being caused by this government and its austerity policies, this harm that is hitting the poorest so incredibly hard, as we see in our constituency surgeries every week. As Owen said, the 1st of April just sees the next wave of these cuts, and people are literally just hanging on by their fingernails right now. And the idea that they're going to have a whole tsunami of council tax benefit reduction, cap on benefits, bedroom tax, more housing benefit cuts, the list goes on, and the pain goes deeper. And this economic crisis, we call it an economic crisis, but as Owen said, this isn't a crisis for the government, this is a golden opportunity, this is the moment they've waited for. Because here and now they are able to essentially cut spending permanently, to shrink the state, and to let inequality grow. And when you've got the Joseph Rowntree Foundation warning that these combination of policies are going to push over 7 million kids below the bread line in the next couple of years, you know, that is an absolute scandal in the 7th richest economy in the world. So we have a government that is hell-bent really on dismantling the public realm, and their constant mantra is there is no alternative. And I think what this movement is about saying very, very loudly there is an alternative. The biggest lie is that it's inevitable. If governments can persuade people that there's nothing else we can do, then in a sense there's no opposition. And so, you know, to my mind, one of the real opportunities of this movement is to say as loudly as possible that the biggest lie is that it's inevitable. There are big, real, radical alternatives, but there are few people articulating them either in Parliament or in the media. We need to make those voices larger and louder and more joined up, and ensure that they're not just saying let's go a little bit less far and a little bit less fast, but let's actually completely change direction. Let's challenge this whole paradigm that says that austerity is essential, that public is bad and private is good, that treats everything from our health service to education as a marketplace. A movement that will say that, in a sense, the Emperor, George Osborne, has no clothes. His policies are not working economically, and they are socially devastating as well. Of course we need to get the deficit down, but the idea that the best way to do it is by throwing out of work 500,000 public sector workers with a knock-on effect in the private sector as well is clearly madness. The best way to get the deficit down is by investing in jobs, getting people back to work, getting their taxes back into the revenue. And you won't be surprised to hear me say that in terms of where I'd like to see some of that investment go, yes, into the green economy, and not only because we have an environmental crisis as well as an economic crisis, but because the green economy is one of the most labour-intensive parts of the economy. You know, a massive programme to insulate every home in the country would be a fantastic job creation scheme. It would get people's fuel bills down, so it would help address fuel poverty. It would you know, create the jobs, get the fuel poverty down, get the environmental emissions down. There are some real win-wins out there. And the green economy actually is a bit of the economy that, in spite of the government's best efforts, is doing reasonably well. You know, when George Osborne says we won't save the planet by putting Britain out of business, you have to ask yourself, what planet is he on? Because right now, the green economy is about the only bit that's doing very well. So the green economy is central to getting us out of the deficit. It isn't a distraction from it. And finally, just in terms of the whole issue about where you're going to get the money to invest in, I think we absolutely need to nail the lie that there is no money. There is money. The question is who's got it and how it's created. You know, if we wanted to look at where money is, there's 100 billion going into Trident over the next 30 years. We could be having a Robin Hood tax here. That would be another 20 billion. Could be properly cracking down on tax evasion, tax avoidance, another 120 billion. Yes, borrow if necessary, but also there's credit creation. You know, when we were able to bail out the banks with $16 trillion worth, they didn't tax to find that money. They didn't find it down the back of the sofa. There was some money created by the banks. Now, it's got a bad name because the quantitative easing we've seen so far has been about a central bank giving it to private banks and not getting it into the local economy. But if you put the money into the economy directly, into the small businesses that desperately need it, we could get Britain back to work, we could begin to address our environmental crisis and the economic crisis at the same time. This movement, I think, is a movement whose time has come. It is hopeful, and I think it's a really exciting time to be part of it.